Everyone to today's discussion. My name is Marianne Hensley. I'm Vice President of Content Marketing and Media Operations for FreightWaves, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here today with our friends at Emerge to talk about how carriers can navigate today's complex landscape with help from the Emerge Premier Carrier Program. Joining me today for the conversation are Emerge founder and CEO Andrew Leto, Emerge President George Abernathy, and Senior FreightWaves Analyst Tony Mulvey, all of whom will also be here to address your questions during the last few minutes of the discussion today. So be sure to send those along throughout the session via the Q&A box in your webinar console. For those listening in, if you have any questions on the technical side of things, as you tune in today, you can reach out to us via the audience chat function in your console, and we'll be standing by just in case you run into anything. We'll also be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow in case you'd like to view it on demand or share it with your colleagues. And at this point, I'd like to welcome our speakers to introduce themselves. And since George will be moderating the discussion today, I will let you kick it off, George.
Thank you, Marianne. Can you hear me okay? Everything's still good, Marianne?
All good.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to have everybody with us. I am George Abernathy. I am the president of Emerge, and I'll pass it to Tony, who will then pass it to Andrew, and then I'll do a little bit of a prelim as we go into this discussion. Tony, introduction, please.
Thanks, George. I'm Tony Mulvey, Senior Research Analyst here at FreightWaves. Been here for about 4 years, so really excited for this discussion with two titans of the industry. So Andrew, over to you.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks, George. So I'm Andrew Leto. I'm the founder of Emerge. And I started Emerge in 2017. So my first company is one of the largest brokers in the United States, Global Trans. And I realized when I was at Global Trans, I started that in 2003, right out of the Navy. I realized that one of the biggest missing pieces of technology in our industry was a RFP platform for shippers. Every shipper, as you know, uses a TMS, and the TMSs, the biggest ones out there, everybody knows the names like Blue Yonder, OTM, Oracle. These TMSs typically never did procurement well, and what we do at Emerge is allow shippers to run a bid, which every shipper really starts a bid at some point. Most shippers do a bid once, or it was during COVID when capacity is tight, 4 times, 5 times, or even once a month. But they're doing bids all the time on their truckload. And when I was at my first company, I realized that most shippers were doing this on spreadsheets and email. And what that in turn did was create an environment where 95% of carriers that have 20 trucks or more, and it's probably closer to 90, even closer to 97%, 95 to 97% of carriers are locked out of the bids, the RFPs that shippers run. And the reason why is because shippers have to limit the amount of carriers they could bring into a bid because, I mean, think about it, if you have an Excel spreadsheet, you can only bring in maybe 20 or 30 parties to that email. So what we do at Emerge is allow shippers to run an RFP for all their truckload, all their over-the-road transportation, including drayage and intermodal. And we then allow carriers outside the shipper's network to come in and also place rates. And I think that's always been one of the biggest problems in our industry, because again, if you're a trucking company that has 20 trucks or more and you want some contract freight, there's a huge percent chance that you are not connected to any given particular shipper. And I think that's a huge problem, because that means, shippers are locking most of the carriers out of the bids. And so who owns the bids is the biggest brokers, biggest carriers in the United States. They're on every single bid. The average shipper in our platform has 20 asset-based providers total, 20. And again, there's 3,000 carriers in the United States, at least in our system, roughly, that have 20 trucks or more. And just think how many carriers are getting locked out of every bid. So I'm going to go to the first slide here that we have. And what we have at Emerge is, again, this RFP platform is for shippers. We started with shippers. And my goal at Emerge for the first 5 years was to get as many shippers as we possibly can on our platform, and that's why we gave it away for free. So we really give a really nice technology to the shipper to run all their bids, award, do the scenario, who they're going to give their freight to, all through our platform. And we did that to build up the density. And we got our density high enough, and I'll go to the next slide, to where we could actually then open a door for truck companies outside that shippers network to start to come in, and for shippers to have access to more capacity, and in turn carriers have access to more shippers. So shippers use us to run their RFP. And if you think about it, every truckload you see on the road, every piece of freight started with an RFP event, and that's a request for pricing. And I look at even a shipper emailing their 10 brokers and 10 carriers is a request for pricing, even if they're not using a bidding system like Emerge. So everything starts with an RFP event. And what we're doing again at Emerge is allowing carriers now to have access to some of the biggest shippers in the United States. And when I say that some of the biggest shippers, here's where we're at now. So we will roughly have 15 billion run through Emerge this year of the for-hire trucking in the United States, which is almost around closing on 5% of all the for-hire contract freight in the United States. Because as you know, contract freight in the United States for-hire trucking is about 300 billion right now. So we have $15 billion of freight being procured every year on Emerge with roughly about 250 shippers. And we have some of the biggest names. We only went after the biggest names to start to get the density high enough. And the reason why we wanted to get the density high enough is so we could have something to bring shipper carriers into. We didn't really open our marketplace up to carriers until April of this year, because if you came on Emerge last year, there was just not enough freight. There's only about 5 to 7 billion. So we had to get to at least 5%, 15 billion, to really have success, to where when a carrier logs into Emerge, there's always at least 10 to 15 bids happening at any given time. So now shippers have access. So how Emerge really works is now shippers have access to their carriers. And again, they bring in on average 20 carriers and 20 brokers. So roughly about 40 total entities to their bid. But now they have access to thousands of more carriers. And I think that's such a big thing for both shippers and carriers. That's never been done before. And then what we call this model, what we have is the Premier Carrier Program. And what that means is now carriers can come in outside of a shipper's network that's not connected to a shipper. And remember, what's great about Emerge is we know since the shipper used our platform and brings all their MC numbers to the bid, we know exactly who's invited to the bid and who's not. So if you're invited to a bid and it's your shipper, you obviously get the invite and you won't have to go through the Premier Carrier Program. But if you're a carrier and you're not connected to a shipper, you could then have access to that shipper's event if you're set up with Emerge. And the reason why we have to set up with carriers is because the whole problem, here's the thing about why do brokers exist anyways? Brokers exist for a lot of reasons, but I would say one of the biggest reasons is the shippers just not able to set up thousands of carriers. If you're a big broker in the United States, the biggest broker in the United States has 90,000 different carrier entities they give freight to every year. Shippers just aren't equipped to do that unless they have a brokerage arm. It's like some of the biggest shippers, or a couple in mind, that have a brokerage arm. They will have thousands of carriers, but most shippers in the United States have access to, again, 20 carriers total. So what we do, again, is this Premier Carrier Program is for carriers now to be able to access these events from the shipper. And as you can see here, how it works is when the shippers see a carrier rate in our system, they see the name of the carrier and any historical performance metrics that we would have. And that's key, because when a shipper tries to set up wants to set up with a carrier, they want to know who that carrier is, and also they're blind to that carrier. And a lot of things, a lot of carriers will know, and brokers know, that in order to get your foot in the door in any shipper, you have to buy a lane to prove yourself to the shipper. So the reason why we show performance metrics is because we want to show the shipper, hey, this is a good carrier. You don't have to try them out, and they don't have to go in and buy the lane from you at a low ball price. If they're a few cents cheaper than the next carrier, try them out. And that's how it works. So when you're a shipper, this is what the shipper sees. They see all the names of the carriers through our platform. And back to my last point, I think I didn't finish that thought. The reason why shippers don't have carriers, or the reason why they need us to have the setup process, is because, again, there's too many. They need to have. No shipper says they want to add more carriers. That's one of the biggest problems, I think, in our industry. If you ask any shipper in the United States, do you want to add more carriers? The answer has always been no, unless they have a brokerage arm. They're always trying to whittle their carriers down. So in order for this to work successfully, and for us to be able to bring thousands of carriers or hundreds of carriers to a bid, that's what we have, that aren't in the shipper's network, we need to be able to set the carriers up. The platform needs to be able to set the carriers up. So that's why we have to set the carrier up. So this is what the shipper would see when they're doing their bid on a lane. So this is like an example right here, Denver, San Francisco. As you can see, it's a live load and a drop at the destination. It's 10 a week. You see that, and you see how long the bid is for. So again, now the shipper has the opportunity to use a carrier they've never done business with, and this carrier has the opportunity now to get a lane that they've never had access to. And here's how our Premier Carrier program works. So the shipper, you see the shipper name. So what's interesting is when you log into as a carrier, you see the shipper's name and you know what kind of event they're running. Is it an annual bid? Is it a seasonal bid? You see that. You also get visibility into all the rates. So when you bid on any carrier, any bids today, you're blind to that. But let's say there's a truck that you want a lane, you know exactly where the rates are coming in at. I'll show you that in the next slide, what that looks like. You could submit bids directly to the shipper. They see your name. Remember, you control the price. So you set the price, and we then charge. In our model, we add a fee to it, and we charge the shipper to use the carrier. And that's how our model works. If anybody's wondering how do we make money, you put a price of $2 in there. We add a little fee to it, and then and it's way less than any other third party would charge. We don't consider ourselves a broker. But that's how it works, very much like that. We put a fee on top of it. It's automated, and that's what the shipper sees. But you set the price. So if you want $3 a mile, and you get an award in our system, you're going to get that $3 a mile. You could create a bid strategy. So you could secure freight from your desired. You could anytime, like let's say a shipper's on our platform and you only want to move freight for them. You could get alerts and see that anytime they have an opportunity to bid. And again, we have right now 250 shippers that you could have access to. Again, there's always at least 10 to 15 bids happening at any given time in a merge. So, we're always growing because remember, we're free to the shipper. We have one of the best RFP platforms in the country that's free. So that we continually bring in more and more shippers daily. And then how it works at a merge is you price it, you set the rates as a carrier, and then we pay you, in your normal payment terms. Now, this is where this is what I think one of the most exciting parts of our platform is the bidding. When carriers are bidding, we want to make sure that you guys know where the rates are at. So you're not wasting your time if it's too low. In this case scenario, this would probably be a lane that, it's under $2 a mile. Maybe you don't want freight that's $2 a mile. That's fine. Don't bid on it. But you'll be able to see exactly where the rates are coming in at. So, if you want this lane, it looks like this one was Fort Worth to Miami. These are going to be, and remember, this is not real data, so don't think this is just a demo. But this would be $1. Let's say this is $3 a mile. You would see exactly where the rates are coming in at. So that's very key to think about. As a carrier, and you don't have that if you get invited to any RFP event today, you don't know where you need to be. You might know, they might let you know, but now you have direct access to know exactly where you should sit. And let's say you're a carrier and you are a great service carrier. Remember, the shipper's going to see that. You don't have to be the cheapest carrier in the system. As a matter of fact, sometimes carriers win in third or fourth position in our system. So you don't have to be necessarily the cheapest. And we're not trying to drive the rates down either. So how it works in our system is if you bid, let's say in this example, you bid $1.40, no carrier in our system can underbid you because we don't want to race to the bottom. That's one thing that we're trying to maximize what the carrier gets. That's our goal. So if you bid if you underbid and you're the lowest bid, we don't allow any other carriers within our marketplace to bid lower than you. Just to recap it. So again, the goal of a merge is to democratize the bid to carriers. I think one of the biggest problems, again, in our industry is that if I had 100 trucks and there was a guy right next to me that's $1 billion shipper, what do you think the chances of me with 100 trucks have access to him as the $1 billion shipper? It's 1 to 3%. That's how many carriers don't get invited to bids. So we are trying to democratize bids so you can see all the freight out there and exactly what are being, what they're being moved at. And that's why we have this competitive insights. To me, it's the most important thing to make sure that you're not leaving money off the table. So if a lane's at $3 a mile, $4 a mile, you don't have to bid $2 a mile to get it, because you can see it's $4 a mile. And that's why we mentioned maximize profits, because again, you're only going to bid on what you want. Remember, our system's free. It doesn't cost you as a carrier to come into our system. And then when you place a rate, you get exactly paid what you want. So you should win, because if you win something in our system, it's because you wanted that freight. One great thing about our platform is you can set lane alerts, and this way you don't have to log into Emerge every day, and we'll let you know, like, let's say you want freight out of a certain area, we would let you know. And that's pretty much, that really wraps up our Premier Carrier program. And like I said, we are not going to allow everyone in. We only want the best carriers on our platform. That's our commitment to the shippers. So it's not going to be like you're going to be competing with thousands of carriers. Our goal is to limit that and have really good partners that are able to come in and buy freight from the shippers on our platform and service them. So that's it. I'm going to hand it over back to George for the Q&A. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrew. That's excellent. I think just to springboard from the point that Andrew just made, that you tend to hear in these kinds of conversations. I'm sure, Tony, you've heard people talk about how they're working with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of carriers, and that's very much not. And Andrew did a great job of describing that. Here, these are going to be carriers that Emerge has qualified and is making available to that shipper on lanes that we know those premier carriers have the ability to serve. And also, as Andrew described, the best carriers, they don't have to be the carriers that have thousands of trucks. They can be those that have hundreds or tens of trucks. And as Andrew described, geographically, I am a 100-truck carrier right next to that billion-dollar manufacturer that I may never see their bid. They have the opportunity to do so and be able to participate. I want to move just to a quick question that sort of also attaches, Andrew, to the Premier Carrier program. Corey DeSantis asks, does Emerge have a way for shippers to quantify the delta between the freight spent estimate on their bid and what actually was spent? And obviously that's where Rate Pulse comes in. And that ability to benchmark utilizing industry data before you run your bid. So for example, a little inside baseball Emerge, we have the ability to know when the platform is being used, and when people are doing benchmarks, that is advising that there could very well be a bid that is going to follow that up. So yes, you're not going in blind, not knowing what the rates are on any particular lane. You're going in with industry data that you get through the Emerge platform in what we call Rate Pulse. Andrew, I'm going to throw a question at you, and then Tony, I've got one. You did a good job, but I want to make sure that folks are aware the Premier Carrier program does differ from the traditional broker intermediary relationship. Do you want to talk to that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so what we do at Emerge is we allow carriers to come in and set the price. So when you're in Emerge, it's not like this is freight that's not, if you go to a broker and buy freight, that's freight that's been bought off an RFP event, like could it be off Emerge? This is direct access to the shipper, and so we don't consider ourselves a broker, right. And you have access to the shipper through the platform, and so it's different. Whereas brokers, you don't set the rate; they set the rate. You set the rate to the shipper, and that's a big thing because that's key. I mean, that's the freight hasn't been bought already from the shipper. You're buying it from the shipper, and it's a big difference when you have access directly to the shipper. One of the questions here, just on the same topic, do you accept brokers into Emerge yet, or strictly carriers? And I would say yet, because we are going to. We just right now are focused on carriers. At some point, we will accept brokers. It's just right now there's the shippers really want more asset providers right now, but we will have brokers probably down the line.
Yep.
Just
And one of
maybe like this now, probably probably middle of next year is when we'll think about
good. Exactly. Something that I was going to point out, appreciate the question asking this, is regards to modes. And when I heard Andrew's vision and joined him a couple of years ago, as I've been chasing optimality and freight procurement for a couple of decades, it can't simply be the truckload, dry van. While that is incredibly complex and challenging, in order for this to really get the kind of value for carriers across the board, you need to be able to attack and deal with all modes. And through our RFP platform, we have the ability to do that. There has been, to Andrew's point, enough time and scale coming in that you will see, and RFPs can be run for drayage, for flatbed, for refrigerated to go along with dry van truckload. So terrific. Every mode, exactly right. Yeah. So that's a terrific question. So, and I want to make sure that we get through these questions before we run out of time and lose anybody. Andrew, if I'm Tara Armstrong asked, if I'm a customer, or I'm rather a carrier already on Emerge with a customer, how do I get access to the others?
Yeah, it's a good question. So again, we're setting up, we call it the Premier Carrier Program. So get in contact and we'll have that information with the Premier Carrier, one of our reps. We have, again, we're only going to we're not going to let every carrier in. So we're trying to get as many good carriers to start, and that's what we're going to, this way we don't want thousands of carriers competing with each other. So we want to just have a few really good ones. So right now is the perfect time to come in. And if you're invited to any of our other shippers, obviously that helps, because that helps us with the vetting, because we know another shipper obviously appreciates your service. So that's one of the biggest things. And, one of the biggest things that we're working on Emerge is the data part. That is when a shipper awards to carriers. Remember, we see all the awards. We know exactly who got awarded at what price and where that carrier is going. Our goal is then to take that information and let when another shipper runs a bid, now we know carrier ABC is running this to this market 10 times a day. We know to bring that carrier into that lane. So over time, the data is going to get better and better. So as far as like us knowing exactly what you would want, because that's what our goal is, that when you log into Emerge and you're not having to see, because right now, even right now we have probably 12 different bids happening right now, and you have to, which one should you work on? Well, it's going to be much easier as we go along, because we're going to be able to have recommendations. We're working on that right now. I would say the worst part of what we have, it's a little clunky right now on the carrier side as far as searching, but we're working on that, to make that better.
Excellent.
I guess,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it feels like, and it's almost like a de-risking from a carrier perspective, right? You're able to reach out to grow their customer base, which is key, right? Because I think throughout this whole freight recession period, a lot of these carriers that are in this size that we're talking, right, 20 to 100, they get siloed into single customers. And when the single customer, if they make a change, well, the carrier's left holding the bag. And this allows them to kind of break away and find multiple shipper customers that, hey, we fit the mold that you're looking for, and we'll do it for this price. So it kind of breaks that silo that they can become victim to.
And actually, I see some big carriers in the attendee list, and I'll tell also the big carriers, like, we see this also where some of the biggest carriers in the United States, usually if you're a top 20, 30 carrier, you have access probably to about 40% of the shippers in our platform, never more than 40%, which is kind of crazy to think about it. Like, so that means you're still locked out, even though there's the biggest carrier in the United States, to 60% of the bids. We have one shipper that's a $3 billion shipper in our platform that has 20 carriers total. And it just blows my mind, because there's, just think how much that shipper is paying or was paying on, because they only have 20 carriers. I would say half of them are the biggest brokers too. So, because there's always a carrier that needs freight out of a region more so than another carrier, and that's a better fit for them. And that's what we're trying to do, is trying to make it to where right now hundreds more carriers have access to that particular shipper's bid. And just democratizing the bid, that's really, if you break down what we're doing with this Premier Carrier program, it's because when I started Emerge, I saw that. I was like, the average shipper in the United States only brings 20 carriers to their bid. And that means there's always means 99% of carriers are locked out. So that's, again, the key to understand what we're doing at Emerge is we're making it available to carriers, and vice versa to the shippers. We're making shippers have access to more capacity, which is key.
Jesse Gill asked a good question, a couple of them with regards to being in the network already, and how can other parts of the business get involved with different modes and the like. Same answer as the question with regards to how can I go from one Emerge shipper to another. Get involved with one of our carrier representatives. You'll have our contact information. And this leads to answering your next question, which is there a release date on the Premier Carrier program? Absolutely. We started this about a little more than 3 months ago, and we're already into the hundreds of Premier carriers, but we are adding and really where we're looking to have this ready as we enter into the bid season that comes up. Companies like Emerge, our platform has allowed for, and Tony, I know you've seen that, bidding because of where rates went became more prevalent, maybe shorter durations and the like, but there's still definitely a bid season. People run bids in that post-Labor Day through the holidays for implementation in Q4 and Q1. We've made estimates that upwards of 50-60% of the freight that's going to be bid on is bid on at that time. And we wanted Premier Carriers, our Premier Carrier program, to be ready to provide value to both the carriers that are part of that and to the shippers that could take advantage of using that. So if you're, again, interested in the Premier Carrier program, reach out to us on our carrier side. If you come to me and I can put you in contact with who you need to get to. But we're adding dozens of Premier carriers every week. We're adding hundreds on a monthly basis, not with the intent of getting to, as Andrew described, tens of thousands. We're going to get to a number where that impacts our shipper community with the kind of value that the scale that we're getting to is trying to get to. So
here's a question.
Go ahead.
Can you explain the lowest bid process? You mentioned that nobody could be bid under $1.40 in the example. How is the lowest bid determined? Well, we know so if you bid $1, let's say it is the lowest bid, we know the lowest bids. So the system won't let any other carriers bid under that. So that's how it works. So you're not going to be, again, it's not a race to the bottom. We don't want this to be a race to the bottom. We want to make sure that carriers aren't, at least in our marketplace, will never outbid another carrier in our marketplace. It just won't happen. And if you become an incumbent on a lane, you own that lane. So that's key to understand too. We will not bring more Premier carriers to that lane.
I think it's important that we've said it a couple of times. Incumbency is something that we value incredibly highly. Yes, this platform that Andrew envisioned and has been built and is now 15 billion plus of freight that's going to move through it, that's going to be procured through it this year. But the amount of commitment to incumbency is significant. We not only allow for that, we foster that as the shipper is doing this. So even though you may be running an additional bid, you may be entering some Premier carriers, if the shipper's desire is to maintain that relationship with the incumbent, everything in the scenario management around the RFPs is there to do so. And as Andrew described, once you can find a way to buy a lane or find a way to become a provider for a shipper and be that incumbent, that ability to protect that incumbency through your service is also something that is reflected in the system. What percentage of shippers that emerge has using the platform are flatbed and dry van focused? Andrew, I don't know if you've got the numbers nearby, but I want to say we're probably 70% dry van and the balance being broken up.
20%, 20% flatbed, 10% reefer, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. Yep.
Whatever the national numbers are, it's close to that.
Yeah, but with that being said, there are, yeah, I think that's a good answer. Is we're reflective of the marketplace. We work with the largest, Fortune 500 providers, and when we say refrigerated, Emerge knows the difference between the requirement for, frozen or refrigerated to move something that's produce or fresh. Those are things that have the ability to be reflected within the platform and then be executed upon when the bids are being awarded. So Tony, I just got a question for you as this is all sinking in. FreightWaves, understands the carrier marketplace as well as you guys do, and you see what's happening to. I think you guys write as much about anybody about when will capacity leave the marketplace. It's this kind of program that can help some of those small, medium, even large carriers that may be challenged to find the right kind of freight. What Andrew's vision is to put the right shippers and the right carriers together. I would assume that that's the kind of thing that should slow down some of the exiting that carriers might have to have.
I mean, you'd be surprised.
Go ahead, Andrew.
But I mean, I'll just add to that, like, it's crazy that, so many shippers, how many are not connected, or how many only have like 5. Some of the biggest shippers, billion-dollar shippers, have 20, 30 carriers total, including the brokers. And brokers roughly are half always, 60%, 70% of the people bidding in our system. So if they have 40 carriers total, maybe 13 are asset-based. So right. It's really locking out. Crazy how many carriers are locked out of some of the biggest bids in the country.
Yeah, and I guess from the perspective here, it helps. I mean, we talk about it all the time. It's when you think about trucking and the truckload market, I mean, it's really really fragmented. It favors the small carrier. Now, this isn't touching those owner operators that still play in the spot market. They'll still do that. This right. just kind of hits that middle market that it is so difficult. They do get so siloed, and in events like what we've seen the past few years, there's so much more risk involved because, I mean, they're still subject to the higher fuel prices, right? And things like that. So,
yeah, I think right now, I mean, we see it. Small carriers I would say they have a disadvantage because they're stuck in the spot market. So whatever the spot market's paying that lane is what they're getting paid. And as we know, spot market got crushed in the last 12 months. And the poor thing for most small and mid-sized carriers is that they don't have access to all these, contract freight, which is still running higher. Am I right about that, FreightWaves? Contract rates are definitely still higher than spot.
Oh yeah.
And way higher. And obviously it was great during COVID. You want to be a spot carrier, but that didn't last that long. And I don't see that going back to a tight capacity situation where you're seeing spot rates at all-time highs like they were a year and a half ago. So the key right now for any carrier is to get into as many contract situations as you possibly can and become an incumbent on that lane. Because remember, incumbency really wins in this industry. You have access, if someone wants to take that lane from you, it would be really, if you're servicing well, it's almost impossible as long as you're, very, close, similar, and, as long as you're not way too much higher, but you could still be higher and win that lane as long as you're an incumbent. And so it's key right now for small, mid-sized, and even larger carriers, because even larger carriers, a lot of larger carriers told me, like, we won't use Emerge. But I'm like, okay, well, that means there's 60% of the shippers that you're not going to even have access to. They think, even the largest carriers don't have access to every shipper. It's just crazy because they just, maybe they didn't get invited to the bid, or the sales rep of a big carrier doesn't see them anymore. And when they come on and they see it, they're like, wow, this is actually better than when we're bidding on our actual, because they see the rates and they're like, wow, this is great. Because now we know exactly where to be on these lanes. So our system is great for all types of carriers, for the small, mid-size, and large. The small ones can team up. So we don't let anybody with under 20. You have to have a certain amount of assets to be part of this program. Just to mention that. So we don't let like the owner operators in. But let's say you have 20, 30 trucks. That's perfect that's our sweet spot is 20 to 500 trucks.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think it's so important, especially that the lowest bids, and you can see the bid as it's happening, right? You know where the prices are. If you know what your operational costs are, like you understand, hey, this lane's not going to be worth it. It's not worth me losing money just to try to get my foot in the door, or it is worth me trying to get my foot in the door because maybe this opens up more opportunity down the road. So you can kind of play both sides as opposed to just playing the spot market like a lot of them are doing right now, where they are, like you said, getting crushed.
Yeah, so like let's say there's a carrier in our system, like even the biggest carriers that have direct access to the shippers, our platform, they might own a lane, but they don't really know that they're at $2. Let's say they buy that lane at $2.30 a mile. They don't know that the rest of the market's at $3 a mile, and they're leaving so much money on the table. It happens almost every single bid where you'd see that if you're on the other side, but that's where that's also something we're hoping that doesn't happen, is where carriers don't have to leave money on the table. If they have a perfect backhaul or a perfect truck that's always there and they could get that lane, you don't have to lowball the lane. You could put a price where it's actually even more profitable. Than we see that all the time, where they some carriers put $2 or $1.50 a mile, and it's like the next carrier up was $2. The number 2 carrier is $2.50. That means they left like 60, 70 cents per mile on the table. So that's something that gets solved with carriers in our market. You don't have to deal with that.
So taking that one step further, Tony, I think really interesting, and what gets me jazzed about this is, as Andrew describes, that the carrier's not leaving money on the table, and the shipper's getting the carrier that wants it at that appropriate rate, which is going to end up yielding better service, more consistent service, and a routing guide can be provided. You can have a routing guide delivered coming out of the RFP that the Emerge platform is being utilized for, that won't fall apart the day that it is provided. So often you're getting, the low cost solve where that too quickly is going to be where carriers bolt trying to, find better freight, or on the flip side, shippers suddenly go, searching for even lower prices. The Emerge, that scale that Andrew has described, is bringing the right carriers in. If you want to include them in on new lanes, provide your incumbents the opportunity to keep that freight, everybody becomes stickier. Your service ends up becoming better. And that actually leads me to our good friend Ed Kern asking the question, how does incumbency and past service play into your award decisions? Is it done algorithmically, or is it a subjective manual process? And Ed, I'll take that, and Andrew can certainly add on to this. Remember, the shipper is deciding on how they want to use the platform. We're giving them the opportunity to see provide to us their objective grades on any of their carriers, and have that be factored in a weighting, WEIGHTING, weighting system to show that. So, and there's certainly, and one should not ignore relationships in this, as Andrew described earlier. Getting in and becoming part of that network is so important. Buy your way in to get a lane so that you're in there and you can start building that relationship. But say again?
Yeah, we do not do the award decisioning process. That's done, right. Again, the shipper. Remember, we're just giving you access to the shipper, and the shipper can now see your name, and then decide whether or not they want to use you. That's obviously in the shipper's hands still.
Yeah, so that's a really critical point, because Andrew described so well earlier what things that the TMSs do well and what they don't do well. That's important. Of the $15 billion that's being procured in 2023, it's being procured by those shippers. It's not running through our hands to decide who's going to and where is it going. So the shippers are making the decisions. We're giving them all the information, all the ammunition necessary to make the right kinds of decisions, but it's those shippers that are making the decisions with the data, Andrew, again, pointing out correctly, data-driven decisions that will end up yielding long-term appropriate relationships. And that the good news is, with a much stickier carrier base than they have had the opportunity to have before. I think that's it for the questions. Tony, anything from the FreightWaves perspective to finish this up?
I think the big thing, right, is it seems like it will help that boom bust cycle that we've seen. The last few years have probably been the most volatile in terms of that, but smoothing that out is going to make everything overall better from a carrier's perspective, from a shipper's perspective, anybody in the freight market. So anything that smooths that boom bust cycle is definitely going to help in opening up these bids to more carriers, to bring on more carriers to bids for these shippers. It's just going to make, like you said, stickier and really help. A rising tide raises all boats, or something. Isn't that the saying? So it seems like exactly what this is targeting. So good stuff.
No, that's really well said. And I'll just give my 2 cents on that. Andrew, one of the faces on the intermediary Mount Rushmore, who is changing this industry as he has finished this up. I just want to say thank you to everybody who has given us the opportunity to provide the information to you about the Emerge Premier Carrier Program. If you're interested in that or anything Emerge related, RFP, reinventing freight procurement, emergemarket.com, Abernathy at emergemarket.com, or you can reach out to, if you're already participating with us, please reach out to your carrier representative, or Stephen Drew, Drew at emergemarket.com, who runs our Premier Carrier Program. So I want to thank everybody. And Andrew, any final words for this group?
No, thank you guys. And keep in mind, we keep bringing shippers on every day. So next year we plan on maybe 20 billion as our goal, 20 to 25 billion. It was supposed to be 20 billion this year, but the rates got cut by 30%. So I think we'll be 20 billion next year run through our platform at least. So definitely get signed up now and get access to some of the biggest shipper bids in the country. I mean, the market intelligence that you get is just incredible once you see it.
Thank
guys,
you.
Bye.
All right, everyone, that concludes our presentation for today. So thank you all so much for taking the time to listen in and for your wonderful questions. Thank you to our friends at Emerge for partnering with us on today's discussion. And of course, thank you again to Andrew, George, and Tony for being here with us today as well. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sending a link to the recording of this webinar tomorrow via the email that you used to register, in case you joined us late or would like to share it with your colleagues. Thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again for another webinar very soon.